The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Perth.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm sure you'll be interested in this. There are many difficult issues that arise in politics, and there is no doubt that West Australians dread hearing of shark attacks in our waters. It's also true that there has been a spike in shark attacks and fatalities in the last couple of years, and that this has caused understandable alarm amongst beachgoers and people, the West Australians, for whom water recreation. Don't let me interrupt the debate going on the other side. There has certainly been a sense of concern amongst those West Australians, the very many of us that love to recreate in our oceans. Over a 10-month period from July 2012, there are 5 people that are thought to have been killed off the coast of the WA coast by sharks. And in the 12-month period to March 2013, there were 8 shark attacks. This is in contrast to the annual average for the decade leading up to that, which was 4.4 attacks per year. So I do understand that Premier Colin Barnett wanted to be seen to be doing something. But I have to say that his diving hook first into the shark cull policy, a program to set up a string of baited drum lines to capture large sharks, was a big mistake. The Premier has seriously underestimated the intelligence of the electorate in playing to their understandable fears and concerns. He has also underestimated what I can only describe as wanting a fair go for sharks. Now, it is not a perspective that that comes to me instinctively. I must say I'm probably more of the let them eat flake brigade. But it is, people have a very strong sense of what is fair out there in the oceans. Now, I do acknowledge there is a sector of the community who do support the cull policy, but my sense is that the majority of people see it as a fruitless exercise that will kill a lot of sharks without making us one bit safer in the water. And the Federal Minister has played Pontius Pilate here. The Federal Environment Minister has played Pontius Pilate and given Colin Barnett an exemption from the federal environmental laws to undertake the cull. The Environment Minister has used a clause in the National Environmental Law that was intended for circumstances involving defence, security and national emergencies, a very dubious use of that power here. There is also a case that this decision is contrary to our obligations under the UN Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species and Wild Animals, and a recent correspondence from that from the Convention Secretariat said the Convention prohibits the taking of such species except under extraordinary circumstances, and that the extraordinary circumstances clause in paragraph 5D of Article 3 of the Convention has not been invoked by a CMS party to the best of my knowledge. So this is a first that we've got. Now, Mr Barnett, in my view, has showed some of his legendary political autism here. He has misread the population, and I don't just mean the usual suspects from the conservation groups and the western and inner suburbs, but indeed, from my conversations with people right across Perth, there is a great resistance to this policy. So the Premier decided that he was going to play a tough, decisive action man, presenting the public with a decision that is largely considered a joke. It would have been much better to have a serious public dialogue before embarking on a response to the spike in attacks. Now, the majority of people I speak to across Perth say 3 things. They say, yes, there is a risk. But for 7 fatalities over the last 3 years, it is a ridiculously small risk to that which we face each day. And they cite the deaths on roads in Western Australia, which are 524 compared to the 7 over that same period. And a study published in the Australian Medical Journal found that the risk of being bitten by a shark while swimming off Perth in summer is just 1 in 3 million, or about the same odds as winning the lottery 3 times. And indeed, 21 Australians die in rips each year. So people get that. They know there's a risk, but they know that it is really, when you consider it, a tiny, tiny risk of being taken by a shark when you utilise the waters. The second point they make, that this is the shark's domain, and they make this very strongly. It is really a very quintessential Australian live and let live approach. And I have been quite surprised at the strength of this value has to the community. And finally, and probably most importantly, they say it won't work. And indeed, it is hard to see how it could. Firstly, no sharks caught have been great whites, although it is that endangered species that is implicated in the vast majority of attacks. So we're capturing sharks, but they're not the ones that are implicated in the attacks. Now, we do recognise there's seasonal factors there, but we believe this will continue to be the pattern. We look at shark culling that was carried out in Hawaii between 1959 and 76. Over 4,500 sharks were killed, and yet there was no significant decrease in the number of shark bites recorded. And they look at culling practices in New South Wales over the last 60 years, and even with the use of shark nets, they found that 23 of the 139 attacks have occurred on netted beaches. And indeed, there is concern that baiting may even be creating a more dangerous environment. We see small sharks are being left on hooks overnight, bleeding and potentially attacking other sharks. And indeed, even the Premier admits that at least one shark was eaten by other sharks while on the hook. And the conservation groups claim that they have video evidence that this attraction of sharks, eating the sharks on the hook, is in fact occurring more frequently. So what should we do? We need to maintain our commitment to aerial patrols. They're expensive, but they do work. We need genuine research and sophisticated search so we know the habits of sharks. We need to educate the public about what they can do to reduce their risk. And we need to invest heavily in shark deterrent capability, be it personal devices or devices used by the fisheries industries, particularly abalone divers. So I would urge the Premier and the Federal Minister for the Environment to, over the next few months, to sponsor a state debate and dialogue with the community so that we can establish some common ground on a way forward. Thank you.